Hello everyone, happy Friday. If you're watching the replay, make sure you put hashtag replay. Y'all, I know this conversation is not supposed to be about astrology, but here's the thing. I have been trying to start this live for legit 20-25 minutes. Mercury is about to go retrograde. If you are into astrology, please just get yourself together, because Mercury is going to retrograde and I already feel it. We still got a couple of weeks, a little bit over a couple of weeks before it gets into retrograde, but you may start to experience things like I'm experiencing them, because I'm a little bit frustrated that it took me this long. But anyway, let me get to the point. I am Dr. Marvette Lacy. I work with doctoral students to write their dissertations in 12 months or less. And last night I hosted the part 1 to the 30-day literature review workshop. It is my 2-hour workshop that shows you how to have a process for writing the literature review. And you might be looking at this title being like, girl, wait a minute, I'm about to get distracted. See, butterfly warrior, you about to distract me, and I love a good astrology conversation. You said I just asked myself if it was a retrograde yesterday. I think this one, listen, it's gonna be a doozy. Okay, let me nerd out for a minute, since y'all seem like y'all my people. Let me nerd out. If you don't know, I also do astrology. I do astrology actually in the group because people love it. But anyway, this Mercury retrograde is going to happen in its home sign of Virgo. If Virgo energy, not Virgo people, Virgo energy is very much about, I work really hard. It's about the details. It's about making immaculate plans. It is about strategy. Virgo energy is about your health, mental, physical, emotional health. It is about your daily routines. How do you get the most done? How do you be of service to other people? And so when a planet goes retrograde, what that means is that from our vantage point on Earth, when we're looking up in the sky, it looks like the planet has slowed down so much, it looks like it's going backwards. But all that happens is that the planet has slowed down, and it is a time for you to reflect, review, reconcile. Any word that starts with RE is the time to do that. Mercury governs communication, technology, gossip, travel, technology, how we learn, how we process. So whenever Mercury goes retrograde, it is slowing down how we communicate. It's slowing down technology, which is why it took me 20 minutes to get here. It's slowing, it makes us misinterpret things. So this is why people get a little bit nervous when Mercury goes retrograde. It's not anything to be, extremely worried about. Just know that you're going to need some extra care and patience like I needed to start this live. So thank you for indulging me in my Mercury retrograde lesson. All right, so yesterday, and let me know if you have any more questions, but yesterday I did the part 1 of the 30-day literature review workshop, and I mentioned to them that while we are talking about literature reviews, I would not suggest anyone to start their proposal with the literature review. And Gary, shout out to Gary, sent me a DM earlier today and asked me to clarify or to explain more why that's my suggestion and where do I suggest that you begin. The reason why I do not think you need to start with the literature review is because nobody's going to ask you about it. Nobody cares, especially at the proposal stage. Now, I'm going to speak in a very general sense. I know we can find programs and chairs and committees who do care about it. I am telling you though, with over my I've been doing this for 7-8 years at this point. I was a student 4 years myself, and I've watched countless defenses, and what I have gathered over about 10 years is that when it comes to the proposal, a committee couldn't care less about it in terms of your literature review. And if I'm going to be real with you, because they won't tell you this, low-key, they're not going to read it. It's no shade to you. It's not that they, don't want to support you. It's just that really kind of at this stage, it's not that important. Now, you want to make sure that when you are identifying a topic for your dissertation, that it is based in literature. I need you to be honest with yourself, beloved. How much have you been reading? How much have you been preparing for your dissertation topic? I need you to take it all the way back to your first year in going forward. How much have you been thinking about, I wonder if I should do this as a topic. I wonder if I should, have this. And if I was to really have a conversation with you, I would almost be willing to bet that you have been thinking about a particular population that you want to work with when it comes to your dissertation, even if you don't have a topic all the way narrowed down. And if because you have been thinking about a particular population, because y'all like to be overachievers, I get it, I'm one too. You probably were like, I'm going to work smarter, not harder. I'm going to make sure that all of my classroom assignments is around these people. I say that to say, because you've been reading. You've been reading literature, you've been reading books, because in order to complete those assignments, you would have had to be reading something. So you're well versed in the literature. Now, you may not be giving yourself credit for it, but you're well versed in the literature. Oh, thank you so much. Listen, I put on makeup and everything today. I went to go speak at a writing group. Feeling good. But yes, you know more than you think you do. And just because you're about to transition into the dissertation doesn't mean that you need to now go read extra. What I suggest people to do is, number one, start writing, but not your literature review. I would suggest that you begin with your chapter 1, your introduction chapter. So when the reader picks up your dissertation, in theory, they should be able to go to your introduction chapter, read the 10 to 20 pages of it, and have a very clear idea what the problem is you're focusing on, the purpose of your research, and how you're going to collect data, why that particular type of data, what are you going to do with that data, and who the study is for. Not only who is going to be centered in the study, but who should be the ideal person to read the study. So if I go through all of that in your chapter 1, I'm like, I bet I'm not going to read your literature review. I'm probably not going to even read your methods chapter. I'm going to go zoop probably to the findings. And if I'm real pressed for time, I'm going to your discussion chapter. Why? Because none of that in the middle got nothing to do with me as a reader. Most of the people who are going to read your literature review and your methods chapter and your findings are going to be other doc students. Again, this is no shade to you. It's just that as a collective, as a society, we don't have the attention span to sit there and read all of that. And if I am looking for evidence to support my own research, I'm going to your discussion section, because your literature review, your methods, all of that has nothing to do with my study. Let me know if you're following me. Put a 1 in the comments, because I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Right? So I strongly suggest that people start with their introduction chapter, because that will force you to narrow down the topic. It's going to force you to get very clear about what is the particular purpose of your study. IRB does not care about your literature review. IRB cares about what data you're going to collect, how you're going to do it, and are you going to follow the ethics set forth by the university or the college. Nobody in IRB land is going to check if you have read enough of the literature. Your committee will only start to check about you and reading and literature if you can't answer questions as to why you're collecting data in the way that you are, or why you're focusing on a particular problem. But the thing that I can tell you, the number one reason why students either fail their defense or never get their topic approved to begin with is they don't have a clear topic, and because they don't have a clear problem. You have a population, you're like, you know what? Like I'll take me, for instance, in my research. I was like, I just want to do something with Black women. It's like, okay, great. Black women have a lot of problems. Which one are you going to focus on for research? Why? Because research is all about exploring problems, finding solutions, finding interventions, contributing back to the field. What problem are you solving? I'll even break it down and do this really quickly. I want you to think about your study. Okay, who are you focusing on? So for my research, my dissertation, I was like, Black women who are in doctoral programs at predominantly white institutions. Great. What is the problem that I'm focusing on when it comes to them? Most of you will say, I just want to know their general experience. Well, that's not a problem. Why should we care as a reader? Why should we care about whoever, right? So if someone was talking to me as a student, a valid question would be, but why should I care about Black women doctoral students? That's a question to answer. It is not a question to get offended. It's not a question to be like, they just racist. That's all they're asking. They might be racist and they might be rude, and it still doesn't stop it from being a valid question. So I had to answer. I'm like, listen, it make sense to me. If Black women are increasingly enrolling into doctoral programs at a high rate, why the graduation rates ain't going up? Why they the same? Why they been the same? Right? So I'm like, I'm curious about what's going on there. And it's like, okay, that's great. That's a good start to a problem. So I want you to think about your study. You know who most likely you know who you want to focus on. What is the problem? What's the problem that they are experiencing? Right? I was like, well, the black women not graduating. Okay, so what? Why, right? Another valid question would be, so why does it matter if they're not graduating? Maybe they're just not doing the work. Now, I do talk real reckless like this because you can ask the people who were on the call last night. I will be a ridiculous committee member because I need you to get like out of your head and your zone of genius, like, because y'all been reading, y'all been talking about this forever, and so you forget that other people don't know what you know because you've been so used to thinking that you don't belong, and you've been trying to prove yourself, and imposter syndrome and got you, and so you've been doing all this reading and working that you don't realize that you're not a beginner anymore. Like, you are an expert. The only thing that's different between you and your committee is a signed piece of paper. They don't know more than you. Right? They may have longer time in the field. They may have more practice. But y'all on the same page. Y'all are colleagues. Now, that little tangent was to say that when you start to write your proposal, because you don't realize that you're already an expert, you start writing in this very, like, all this jargon and using these big words, and you make all these, like, overreaching statements, and no one knows what you're talking about in your introduction and your literature review and your dissertation as a whole. And so then you get feedback that says, keep writing, keep going. Like, you think it means read more. It doesn't mean read more. It means make your writing easy for us to understand. Make it make sense. Okay, let me go back. So what is the problem then that you're focusing on? So I was like, okay, retention rates, something's not happening here. But it's like, go further. I was like, I wonder if the reason why Black women are not graduating at higher rates from doctoral programs at these white institutions is because they don't see nobody that look like them. Because at the time, I was in a program that had probably more Black folks in it than anyone else. That was a rare occasion. That is not what it is like it's not like that now, definitely. But I was wondering, like, maybe for other folks that I would meet around campus or I meet at other institutions, I'm like, they don't have the same thing. So to me, that would make sense, because it can't be that they are not working hard enough. Because, I mean, have you been around a Black woman in academia? It's not hard work. It's not because they don't want it enough. There must be something else. And when I was like, if I remember from the literature that I was reading since year one, semester one of my doc program, people would be like, mentoring is important for Black women, or, yeah, mostly mentoring, because it wasn't that much. But most of that literature was based on the experiences of undergraduate students. So I was like, that's something else. That's another layer of why I need to do this research. So when I went to my chair and I said, listen, girl, I am curious about Black women and their sense of belonging. But even a little bit under that, I'm curious about how do they think of themselves? Y'all, in terms of identity development, it is my jam. And I believe, especially as folks of color, our community makes up a big part of how we identify as people. So I was like, I want to do all of this in one study. The problem that I'm looking at, it comes down to retention rates, but a little bit under that is about, do people have people? Like, do Black women have people that they can speak with, that they can share their experiences with, that will help them make sense of who they are and how they fit into this doctoral program, which would then help them to graduate. Now, I don't know. I didn't know that for sure, but I wanted to explore that. And when I say it in that way, it gives very clear boundaries on what it is that I was reviewing or exploring in my study. Most of you have very vague, big problems. It's great that you want to understand the experiences of certain groups of people, but why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? What would happen if you didn't do it? Why are you the right person to do it? Answering those questions will help you get to a clearer problem statement. Some other questions to consider is, what is currently being done to address the problem that you are exploring in your study? So if I go back to my dissertation, I was like, well, they keep talking about mentoring, but no, that ain't working. I was like, oh, there's some online communities popping up, but you have to be tech savvy and you have to be willing to be on a computer. Now, this was 2016, y'all. It was before the pandemic. Nobody was trying to be on the internet. Zoom wasn't really doing that. Skype was like, you only do that if you have a random conversation with someone long distance. Like, it wasn't what it is now. And so I was like, I mean, while communities exist, people probably are not really using it. And then the other thing that was happening, I was like, you could go to a conference and meet other Black women, but that requires money and time that students may not have. So that is why I am curious to go talk to other Black women to see how are they building community and how does that help them to understand who they are and how does that then contribute to them graduating from their programs. That's where my study was born. I want you to think about you. What is your study? So if someone is brave enough, you can put your problem statement. I know there's a lot to type, but if you are brave enough, I would love to talk to you through that. But everything in this proposal comes down to the problem statement, which is why I spend so much time on it. No matter what the workshop is, we always begin with, what is the problem? Because as I'm talking to you about my study and the problem, then you can get real clear about then what the purpose is. I am curious about how Black women make meaning of themselves. Now my chair was like, you could do some more. You can put your own little razzle dazzle on it. I was like, girl, I just want to graduate. She was like, but do some more. So then I was like, okay, what if there's only like 1 or 2 Black women per college at the University of Georgia? I was like, what if, like, where are they getting their examples from? Right? Particularly first generation Black women in doctoral programs, who are they like looking to, right? Because at some point I was like, my mama, my aunties, my grandma, like, I love them. They will always be strong figures in my life, and they haven't done this. They haven't been in spaces like this. So I naturally started going into like looking at pop culture. And at this time, you have Scandal on the TV, you have Being Mary Jane on TV, you have Insecure just starting. I was like, I wonder with these new representation of Black women, could that be something that other Black women in doctoral programs are looking at to help them cope with being in these programs? So I decided to add that as an element. That allowed me to be creative. I had a chair who was supportive of that. I'm just walking y'all through my examples so you can know how I got there. But all of this comes back to having a clear problem. What is your clear problem? When you can figure that out, and you can say, like, this is the problem I'm addressing, this is the purpose. The third part that you really want to focus on is, who do you want to read your dissertation? I get it. You might be like, I want everybody to read it. That's great. Everybody can read it. But who is the person with the power and the influence to help solve the problem that you are addressing? Everyone can read it, but not everyone has the power and the influence to help you. So who you focus on as participants may not be who you want to read it. Who is the stakeholder that you want to read the dissertation, and what do you want them to take from it? If I go back to me and my dissertation, I was like, listen, my chair was like, you should write it for graduate programs, doctoral programs. And I was like, listen, girl, respectfully, I don't really give a fuck about them, because they're not doing anything. This literature been saying the same thing over and over, and nobody seems to do anything about it. So I am going to talk to the Black women in the doctoral programs. So the way I wrote my dissertation was talking to them directly. So the way my language was, the way my recommendations were written, the way like recommendations for future research were listed was for Black women in doctoral programs. Now, I threw a few in there for graduate programs because my committee was like, well, you have to. I'm like, whatever, girl. You could take these 3 and be good with it. But if you go find my dissertation, because some of y'all are good, y'all stalkers, because it ain't on nobody's ProQuest, right? But if you go find my dissertation, you'll see that in my chapter 5, I start off by saying, hey, I'm going to get to your traditional format of a chapter 5, but right now I need to talk to my participants, my co-researchers, because I didn't call them participants because words mean things, but that's a different live for another day. And I just wrote a long letter to them. Why? Because who I wanted to read my dissertation the most were them. That was my stakeholder. Who's your stakeholder? Why I'm starting here and why I'm telling you to start with chapter 1 is because when you go to talk about, this is what I want to do for my dissertation, when you go talk to your chair, your committee, those are the questions that those are the questions they're going to be asking, even if they don't explicitly ask you. They may just say, tell me what your topic is, but they are expecting you to know that you should be filling in all the blanks for them. The problem, the purpose, and the significance of it. Meaning, who do you want to read it and why? That is how you can say a clear topic and get it approved. But if you are constantly reading article after article, book after book, and all you're doing is reading, and you're not writing, and you're not trying to figure it out, you're going to start talking. It's going to come out a jumbled mess. You're not going to be able to give a clear, straight answer. And while that does come off like you haven't been doing any work or you need to read more, we can have a conversation about how that is some disguised oppression. We're just going to blanket it and say oppression. But a lot of it too is people having trouble communicating. Because depending on how long your chair, your committee they have been in faculty, they've been working with doc students, they may be real jaded. They may be like, you know what? It's going to take you a solid year to like get out of imposter syndrome and get out of your anxiety. You're going to keep reading before you actually do some real writing. So I'm not going to even try to explain it to you. You have to go figure it out. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just telling you how most faculty approach it. But when you can focus on, here are the people, here's the problem, this is my purpose, and this is the significance, and you can package it in that way and give it to them in a very concise and deliberate manner, they're like, oh, okay, great. Let's write that up so you can go ahead and defend it. But if you are going to their offices and you're making meetings with them being like, well, I've been reading and reading. You told me to read. I got like 1,000 articles on my computer and I just been reading and I can do this and I can do this. But what about this? And what about this? You lose them. And now they just say, okay, well, keep reading. Let me know when you come to a conclusion. And you may be walking away feeling very frustrated because you're like, well, I just told you, aren't you supposed to help me narrow down a topic? And I wish it was different, but it's not. And they're probably not going to help you. Now, do you have some amazing chairs out there who will sit there and go around the mulberry bush with you, circles and like all the things with your 50 million topic ideas? Sure, I had one of those. She loved to she's like, and you could do this. But at some point she was like, girl, pick one and let's move on. We don't got no more time for this. Let me pause and look at the comments. Okay. Thank you. My stakeholder interest reader, presidents at 2- and 4-year colleges with no continuing education divisions. And thank you so much for your courage. Thank you for your courage. What do you want them to do? So what do you want these presidents, after they read your dissertation, what is it that you want them to be able to do? Or what will they, based on the data and your findings, what will they be able to do as a result? So if you will let me know, it'd be great. Listen, Marthea, okay, words just be coming out. I don't know. When you start with your introduction chapter, you have a clear outline to your entire dissertation. Your chapter 2 does not give you that outline. Chapter 1 gives you that outline. Now, after you have a very shitty draft of your introduction chapter, I want you to immediately move to chapter 3. Do not touch that literature review. We're not there yet. You want to go to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is where you're like, okay, here's the methodology I'm going to use. And for my qual people, because I'm qual, I wish I could understand quantitative. Listen, it's not from a lack of trying. I just don't think we mix. Okay, I have read a lot of books. I've been in a lot of classes, and it still just don't quite make sense to me all the way in a way that I need it to. But for my qual people, I don't care what other people tell you. I'm a snob when it comes to this. You need a methodology. And I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to not have one that says general qualitative research. In my world, that does not mean a thing. That's not real. It's not a real thing. Now, I have friends who try to be facetious and like give me citations. And I'm like, I don't care who cited what. I'm telling you that's not a thing. What is your methodology? the traditional, and I'm going to use this word, traditional methodologies when it comes to qualitative research. You got ethnography, you got grounded theory, you got a case study, you got a narrative, and you got phenomenology. Pick one. Most of your chairs are going to say phenomenology because that's what they think when they think of qualitative research. I'm not about to argue about it right now. Again, that's another conversation. If that's what they want you to choose, go ahead and choose that. For those of you who think that you're going to do a grounded study, I just want to ask you, how long do you plan on being in your program? Because if you think that you're going to do a grounded study and you're going to graduate in May, friend, absolutely not. Unless you are fully funded and you plan to spend all your time, waking hours with your dissertation, let that go. Don't do that. Don't set yourself up. Okay, let's just keep it cute. I'm going to suggest you do a phenomenology or narrative. And if I'm going to be real honest, is it missed out to, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to go narrative. Okay, another conversation. Okay, problem statement. Black males have had the highest unemployment rate for the past 20 years. Critical phenomenology here. So I am going to assume that you are choosing phenomenology because you are, most people say because they are interested in the experiences, but you let me know. And I'm going to be a little bit ridiculous. Why do we care that Black males have had the highest unemployment rate for the past 20 years? I'm going to be ridiculous, right? Society says, well, they don't want to work anyway, so doesn't that track? Why is it our problem that they have this rate for the past 20 years? Again, that is what your reader is going to be asking themselves. Your reader is going to I'm going to keep talking because Instagram's trying to play me. They might think I'm doing some hate speech. Okay, if you can answer those questions about Black males, that'll strengthen the problem statement. You might already have those answers, but I want you to think about it. Why do we care? Why should we care? Is there anything that can even be done about it? Okay, Chris, you said, what about ethnography? Would that work? It will work, but also with ethnography, remember, it requires you to have prolonged exposure or time in a particular culture or organization. At a minimum, we're talking 6 months. Minimum 6 months. To do ethnography, a lot of people will tell you at least do a year, if not 2 years. Now, if this is an auto ethnography, that's a whole different story because most likely but you want to think about how much time do you have, right? Because ethnography requires you to do a substantial amount of observation, a lot of field notes. You might do some interviews. You may even do some focus groups. You may do some content analysis. You can still hear me because it keeps saying poor connection and I'm going to just keep talking. Okay. Yes. Thank you for saying you have answers for why we should care. And here's the thing. I want you to have an answer about why people should care like a 5-year-old can understand it. And what I mean by that is if you're saying anything around racism, I was talking to someone last night about using critical race theory. You understand that theory. The average person doesn't. Y'all, look at the news, right? Everybody in these states over here fighting about banning critical race theory. And if you were to ask them to explain it to you, crickets, they don't even know how to explain it. That is true for your faculty as well. So make sure you're explaining your reasons like a 5-year-old can understand it. And you might be doing that. I just want to make this helpful for everyone on here. Okay, a phenomenological case study exploring the pre-college experiences of Black women pursuing career and technical education degrees at a community college. Ooh, so are you working at a community college? Is this a site that you are familiar with? Will it be a site or several sites that you will be visiting? And I am curious, tell me more about this phenomenological case study piece. Why putting those two things together? Let me know, because it's two methodologies and I'm just curious why putting those two things together. Okay, so you're gonna go back to what I was saying, you're gonna go to your chapter 3 and you're gonna decide, okay, what is my methodology? Why am I choosing that methodology? If you're choosing something like any methodology really, but particularly phenomenology, whose theory of phenomenology are you using? There's different schools of thoughts when it comes to phenomenological research. Whose theories, whose backing are you using? You want to say that in that chapter. You want to make sure you are explaining to the reader, this is why this methodology is appropriate for this study. A methodology is just talking about the philosophy of how you're going to approach data collection. That philosophy should be in alignment with who you are as a researcher, which then brings me to my next point. What is your paradigm? A paradigm just simply means, what is your worldview? When it comes to research, in particular, how do you see research? Most of y'all who come into my world are critical researchers. Critical means you like to focus on the systemic pieces of society and how systems show up and power dynamics show up in the research process. Right? So you may be someone who believes, number one, that a person's lived experience counts as legitimate data. There are people out here, y'all, who do not believe that experiences are data, who do not believe that words, people talking to them, are legitimate forms of data, which is why you have to spell everything out when you're crafting a research project, because you cannot make assumptions that everyone thinks like you or sees research in the same way that you do. So if you're using a critical or transformative paradigm, number one, right, it's like people, words are data, their experiences are legitimate forms of data. You would also be someone who's like, if they said it happened, then it happened. I am not someone to say it didn't happen, and I'm not going to go back in the analysis process and say that they are wrong and look for the big truth to be objective. If you are calling yourself a critical transformative researcher, objectivity, that's not a thing. That's for somebody in the back. That's not a thing. Right? What you're saying is like everyone has their experiences, and those experiences also are connected to systemic forms of oppression, that we can't divorce those two from one another. And so in the research process, that means that, of course, you're going to ask people to tell you about their experiences, but you are also, as a research instrument, because in qualitative research, the researcher is the instrument. You as the instrument is going to take their experience and connect it to like the larger systems of oppression. Also, what you need to be doing is looking for how are you, whether you intentionally or not intentionally are doing it, how are you upholding systems of oppression within the research process? An example of this would be if you say, oh, I'm going to do interviews, but they must meet me at this particular location. You have to ask yourself, are the people that you are asking to be participants, is it reasonable to suggest that they can get to that location? Is it reasonable to say that they have the resources to get there? Do they have the know-how to get there? Would it put any unnecessary burdens on them to get to that location? When you are doing an interview, are you going to be the only one who's allowed to ask questions? Are you going to give them the questions ahead of time? Y'all, all of this goes back to who you are as a researcher and your philosophy. For those of you, again, who think you are critical and transformative, I'm not here to tell you you're not who you think you are. I'm just saying, are you looking at how power dynamics are even being shown up, how they're showing up in your study? This is why I'm like, go to your chapter 3 first. Because you're making a lot of decisions, and because you've never done this before, chapter 3 is usually the most challenging chapter. What happens is that people spend all their good energy on their literature review, and then they're real confused when they get to the chapter 3 and they're like, wait a minute, nobody told me about this. Yeah, this is why I suggest you just go to chapter 3. Because you need to ask these sorts of questions. So once you have your methodology, how are you going to collect data? This is methods. How do you get data? Is it going to be interviews are usually a common thing? Focus groups are common. Observations. Content analysis, meaning you're going to look at somebody's website. Maybe you're looking at some documents. Maybe you're looking at some tweets, some social media groups. How are you going to get data? And why are you choosing those methods? Why are those methods appropriate to help you address the purpose and problem that you stated in your introduction? Why? Just because it's qualitative doesn't mean you have to do interviews. That's going to help somebody. Qualitative doesn't always mean interviews. It just mostly means words. Let me make sure I plug my phone so they don't go out on us. I know someone right now who is about to finish her dissertation, hasn't talked to not one human. She's doing a content analysis. So you want to think about, what is the data that you need for your study? After you talk about the data, okay, what about the people? Go into great detail about who do you need or want your participants to be? Right? For someone who's like Black males, what about them? Are they unemployed? Do they live in a particular region of the country? Do you care about how long they've been in the country? Do you care about ethnicity? Do you care about education level? Do you care about other things? A lot of y'all are afraid to get very detailed about who your participants are going to be. A lot of you are afraid to narrow it down because you're concerned that you won't get enough participants. On average, you're looking for about 10 to 15 participants. I would actually encourage you to go closer to 10 than 15, but you got to do what your chair tells you to do. But who are these people going to be? The more details you can provide, the easier it will be to find participants. Once you have named that, then you want to say, okay, how will I recruit people? How will they find out about my study? Y'all, we got the internet. I hope that you have an internet strategy, particularly a social media strategy for your recruitment. Listen, your committee, your faculty, I don't know how old they are, but they may not think to use social media. We live in a different world now. And it is much easier to find people on the internet than it may be to find them around your community. Now, if you're doing something like a case study, that's different, right? Because you may know exactly which organization you're going to. The people, you probably already have connections. But if you are like doing interviews and you want to recruit people, use social media. I promise you that would go by quicker than you trying to do this other ways. But how will people find out? Do you have a website? Do you have, I don't know, like, should they email you? Like, is it like a word of mouth type thing? How will people find out about your study? And once they find out about it, what should they do? Should they contact you? Should they go somewhere and sign up? Right? All I'm doing is going through chapter 3 right now. You want to really think about that. The last piece that I'll say about chapter 3, and I'll go back to chapter 2, is what is your timeline for collecting data? Like, not only how long it's going to take you, but what order steps are you going to go into? You want to think about this now. Why? Because those are going to be the primary questions you're asked in your proposal defense, and that's what IRB cares about. If you can do this work now, IRB will go, it will be so much smoother. Based on what I just told you about chapter 1 and chapter 3, can you see now why I would tell you to start there? Because there's probably a lot of decisions and a lot of things that you did not consider, that you probably don't even know, that you probably haven't even read about. And I would much rather you use this fresh energy to figure those things out, because those are the things that are most important. A literature review doesn't really come into play until you're writing your discussion chapter. That's why no one really asked you about it in your proposal defense, because we don't know what we're talking about. Chapter 2, your literature review, the purpose for your proposal especially is to justify the study. Is to justify, why are you doing this study? Why are you exploring, Black males' unemployment rates, and why it's been the same for the past 20 years? Your literature review should give the reader every detail that they need to understand where you are coming from. Because we can have similar topics And we can use the exact same literature, but how my literature review looks is going to be different than how your literature review looks. Why? Because we're two different people with two different philosophies, with two different worldviews. There is not one standard way to write the literature review. It comes from the argument that you're making. It comes from how you're justifying your literature. That means you have to say, here's my stance. When I wrote my literature review, I was like, yeah, all these like identity development theories and all these other stuff don't really mean anything to me. It's just repackaged white supremacy is what I said. Right? But that's completely different than my friend who was also studying the experiences of Black women. Hers was very much like, here's the theories. This is what we know. We've come a long way, but we got so much further to go. We had two different tones, even though our topics was very similar. This is why you cannot look at somebody else's literature review and write yours, because their literature review is their interpretation and their arguments and their justification. Y'all are two different people, two different individuals. You first have to think about what is the lens in which you are looking at this study, which is why we go back to the problem statement. Why should we care about your problem? Why should we care about it in the way that you think about it? And what do we need to understand? What do you need to teach us in order for us to see it from your point of view? Let me know. Can I get a 1 if y'all are following me around this whole idea of there's no one right way to write a literature review? Okay. Case study and phenomenology are two different things. Yes. Tell me more, though. Tell me what you're thinking. I know I'm asking you to do a lot of typing out on this phone. But they are. And some people do find creative ways to bring things together. I just wanted to make sure I was following you. Thank y'all for the ones. What is your view? Let me go back to what your topic was, because this will give me an example. I used to work. Okay. One person could be talking about community colleges, and they could be talking about how, it's really good for folks who want a 2-year degree or they want a technical. It could be really good. Community colleges could be great for adult learners, those who are later in life, who want to go back and learn certain skills, right? We could be using the same literature and I could be talking about that. Or you could be talking about, I don't know, I have a client who's looking at the experiences of Black women in community colleges and how they experience sense of belonging and how that helps them to transfer to 4-year institutions. Could still be using the same literature, but that literature review is going to read differently. I teach a process for writing. Because there's no one way to write a literature review and it depends on your voice, what I teach in my workshop is how you find your voice. How you can synthesize literature instead of just summarizing it. What I mean by that is a lot of people, if you read a literature review, they'll be like, oh, author 1 and researcher 2 said this, but so-and-so and so-and-so said this. And so-and-so and so-and-so said that. And that's the entire literature review of 100 pages. It's just a bunch of summaries. It's boring. Nobody's going to read it. And that doesn't really tell us what you think. There is a way for you to say what you think and still cite your work. That's the whole reason why you're becoming an academic. I know some of y'all are doing this for jobs and other reasons and for the clout. But traditionally, historically, a terminal degree is to help you take in a lot of information, learn how to make sense of it, say this is what I think about it, and be able to articulate an argument rooted and justified by the literature. I teach you a process for you to be able to do that. Because it is overwhelming to write the literature review because you're like, what do I include? What don't I? I'm sure y'all have been listening to this and being like, well, now I really don't know where to start. I am teaching you a process. I am helping you to get to your first shitty draft, which is about 20 or 30 pages. And you're going to take that shitty draft, you're going to give it to your chair or whomever is responsible for approving it. And then you're going to get their feedback, because in their feedback to that initial draft is going to be clearly laid out expectations. They're going to tell you what they don't like. They're going to tell you what they want you to focus more on. They're going to tell you whose work they want you to include in it. That's like gold. It's great instructions, because now you know exactly what it is that they're looking for. It would be great if they could tell you that up front, but most people can't articulate their expectations clearly in that way. They can only tell you what's wrong with a thing instead of telling you, here's exactly how I want you to write the literature review. So yes, you do have to write a draft and give it to them and then wait for their feedback. I went on a rant last night to say, how about we all just make peace with the fact that you're going to have to rewrite, no matter what the draft is, at least 5 times. Because if you can make peace with that, you won't be so upset, or you won't take it as personal when you're turning something in and your chair rips it apart. Because you're like, oh, one draft down, let me go write the next one. Here you go. Oh, 2 drafts down, let me go write the next one. Because it's not about you, it's just writing. No matter how long you've been writing, an editor, whoever is going to give you feedback, if you're going to submit it to a journal, someone's going to tear it apart, because that's what's involved in writing. We can't skip that part. Okay, I just pulled up my paper. The purpose of this methodological study will be to explore the pre-college experiences of Black women pursuing a STEM career and technical education pathway. Tell me why. So at the end of the sentence, I love it, I'm following it, add a few words as to why does this matter. Is it because you're concerned about retention? Is it to just highlight how they have successfully navigated it? Like, add a few more words to the end of that. Excuse me. If you're just joining me, I'm just ranting about literature reviews. I'll give y'all an overview about, okay, well, how do you get started? So when you have literature, first, I want you to pick a certain amount that you will focus on at a time. I strongly suggest that you take it 10 articles at a time. 10 articles. You're going to take those 10 articles. Before you read a thing, you're going to write out the citations. Now, I know y'all have apps or whatever. That's great. If it works for you, it works for you. But you want to list out, you want to be able to have the full citation as well as the in-text citation, because it's going to save you, it truly will save you time on the back end. But you want to just go ahead and write those out. But you want to have 10 articles at a time. You're going to take 1 article at a time. You're going to read the abstract, the introduction. You're going to skip all the way to the discussion and the implication section. But like that recommendation part. You're not going to read their literature review. You're not going to read their methods. You're not going to read their findings. Everything that you need is going to be in a discussion, implication, recommendation section. In the abstract, really. Right? Because you're looking for, okay, you found this and you made it mean this. And this is what you're recommending us to do for practice and for research. Those recommendations is how you then justify the work that you're doing. It is in their recommendations that you justify, this is why I'm doing this study. Because the goal isn't to go find an article of someone who did a project just like the one you want to do, because then there's no point for you to do it unless you're trying to like validate their results. The literature is supposed to help you justify why you're doing your study. So I only want you to read the abstract, the introduction, the discussion, implications, recommendation. Give yourself 10 to 15 minutes to read that. The reason why there's a time limit is because y'all get carried away. You got all the highlighters and the stickers and you want to copy and paste quotes. We don't got time for that. Just read those sections. Immediately after you're done reading, open up a document and write out a shitty paragraph. Just let your brain write it out. Just like whatever comes up, you put on a page. If you need some questions, it's what was this article about? What were the main findings? Do you agree with the findings? What would you have done differently? And you just want to answer those questions and put it on the page. And you do that for all 10 of them. At the end of the 10 articles, you do not go find more. You do not find more in between. You want to stick to those 10 articles. At the end of those 10 articles, and you have 10 article summaries, then you want to say, give yourself a high five, take a break, come back, read over your summaries. And then I would encourage you to open up a new document and say, if I had to write a 2-page paper based on these 10 articles that I read, what would I say? If I just had to write a 2-page paper, no one's going to see it. But if I just had to write a 2-page paper based on these 10 articles, what would that 2-page paper say? And that's what you do. You just write it. After you're done writing it, you want to edit it. We're not going to look up anything. I'm going to keep saying this because I need y'all to realize that you do more researching and reading, and that slows you down. You think in the moment that it's helping you, but it's not. We're going to write those 2 pages. We're going to edit it. And we're going to send it to somebody. Now, if you would have allowed yourself to do that entire process, in between, there would have been things of like, oh, I should go read this, or I should go look that up. I suggest you get a parking lot document. It's what I call it. It's just a document of things that I'm like, let me make sure I go find this book. Let me request this article. Let me go talk to so-and-so. It is only after I have written, edit those 2 pages, and I sent them off that I then go find those things. Stop trying to do that in between, like while you're writing. Stop saying, oh, I'm going to go write a page in my literature review, and you write 1 sentence, and you're like, remember that paper that I wrote in that one class? And then you stop writing and you go find that paper. That's slowing you down. That is stopping you. The brain likes to focus on one thing at a time. You keep trying to switch and answer emails and go find this thing over here and go like, oh, let me go reply to this DM. You are slowing your progress down. It is why you're having a hard time writing. It's not money. Not money. It's not time. It's not energy. It's not motivation. It is because you keep stopping yourself instead of allowing yourself to just put words on a page. Because you're being critical of those words. When that's for your editing self, let yourself do writing right now. Just put words on the page. Okay, I'm going to pause. Let me know if y'all have questions about that. All right, this matters because representation is low for Black women in STEM majors and careers. I am using the attribution theory to shed light on how external and internal factors guided their decision to go into a STEM field. This is important because Black women typically due to lower wages, majors in STEM can provide higher wage jobs. Okay, it's important because the pipeline for Black women in STEM needs to grow to influence this disparity. Okay, I'm gonna be ridiculous. I think you get it now. Okay. And let me name that I'm not as familiar with attribution theory, or I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but let me know. Maybe I need to look it up, but what I was going to say was, how do we know that it's not just simply coming down to they just don't belong in STEM fields? And why do they need to make more money? Why do they need to be in higher wage jobs? What is that going to do for them? What is it going to do for the field? What is it going to do for other people? Why do we care if Black women are in these positions or not? Why does it matter that there's a disparity? Why is it a problem that it's a disparity? And if you want to, I don't know if you are in a place where you can come on live, but if not, we can keep doing it through comments. I just wanted to give that as an option as well. But that's the question, y'all. Why do we care? You may be like, but it's racism. It makes sense. Does it? To who? Who does it make sense to? Because if it's not my reality, if I don't live in this world, if I don't even know any Black women, why would I know it's a problem? That's why I have to ask these questions and be the ridiculous committee member. Right? This is beautiful. It sounds beautiful. There is going to be someone who's like, but why does it matter? If so-and-so over here, like this group of people are doing great, it clearly comes down to these Black women just not doing enough. If that's the perception of the world, y'all have to clearly articulate why that's not the thing. Just like Kimberly Crenshaw clearly articulated in that Ford's, or it was a General Motors case about intersectionality, right? Because the argument there was, well, black men are doing well and white women are doing well, so it must be the black women who got the issue. And she had to argue as to why their experience was different. And that is how she got to even coining the term of intersectionality. But it was a court case, y'all. So she had to be very clear in her explanation, because for all intents and purposes, like, that argument of black men are doing well and white women are doing well, so it must be just the black women are having personal problems, sounds logical. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. That sounds logical. And so then Dr. Crenshaw had to come in and be like, let me tell you in a logical way as to why that's not working. You have to do the same thing in your research. You just can't make assumptions that people understand. And I'm not just saying this for you, who's putting their stuff on here. I'm saying this for everyone on here. Y'all have to spell things out for the people. So, are we good about how to review articles? You're going to take it 10 at a time. If y'all see me, I'm just playing on my cards. I need to do something with my hands. But you're going to start with 10 articles at a time. You're going to read the abstract, the introduction, the discussion, the recommendations, implication sections. Immediately, you're going to write a shitty paragraph summary of it. At the end of the 10 summaries, you're going to open up a new document and you're going to write 2 to 4 pages about what did those 10 articles include. And you're going to write and edit it, and you're going to send it off, and you're going to go on to the next 10 or whatever like came up for you as you were writing those first 2 to 4 pages. And you're going to keep doing this all the way until you get to 20 pages. Now, here's the thing. This sounds very tedious, and I get it. But the reason why I have it in this way, you cannot skip steps, because y'all gonna like to skip steps. You're gonna be like, I'm not gonna do the 10 summaries, I'm just gonna read it. And what you're gonna find is you're gonna get overwhelmed. These steps, this tediousness is there for a reason, because I'm giving you a process. Those summaries that you're writing, not only are going to help you write your literature review right now, they're going to help you write your literature review when you have to rewrite it when you go to chapter 5. People don't tell you this, but you're going to have to rewrite your literature review. Why? Because in your proposal, you were just guessing, like, I think this is where the data are going to lead me, or I think this is what I'm justifying. And you're going to defend that, and then you're going to go collect data, you're going to start talking to people, you're going to start making connections. There's going to be some more books that come out, other articles that are published, right? You're going to start to see things in a completely different way. And so by the time that you get to writing your discussion chapter, you are a whole new person. You are the updated version of the research instrument. And that literature review will no longer serve the same purpose. Like, it won't work in the same way. So this is why those summaries, because you can come back to it. And I suggest that you do something like that you can search. That's what saved me in writing my dissertation, is that I could search through my summaries to be like, oh, I could use this citation, I could use this source, which is why I have you write out the full citation. Okay, let me see. Let's be great with sharing. But you want to do the summaries, and you want to keep them, because you're going to have to rewrite your literature review. And it won't feel the same weight as it does right now when you're rewriting it at the end. I don't know if Dr. Broom is still on here, but she will tell you it won't feel the same. You'll be like, oh, I got to rewrite the literature review. No problem. Because chapter 5 will be its own challenge in itself. But that's a conversation for another day. I don't know why it won't let me bring her. I'm assuming that it's a her. I'm not trying to be rude. Unless I don't know how to use Instagram, but I'm hitting accept and it won't let me accept you. So let's just keep doing this. Let's just make peace with rewriting every draft 5 times. And let's make peace with the fact that people need you to hold their hand. I want you to write a basic, boring dissertation proposal. When I say basic and boring, I mean I need you to define every word you're using. If you're using terms like racism, define it. If you're using terms, if it's a term that a 5-year-old cannot understand, you need to define it and you need to provide an example. when you are writing, if you have any pages that is sitting on your computer, I need you to go and define your words and provide examples. Okay, it worked.
Yes.
Now, thank you for being in the car. One thing I want you to know is that you're going to see the comments come up. Just know that it's a slight delay, about
Okay.
like 2 minutes or so. So we might be on a different part and they may be somewhere else.
All right,
What we
cool.
said.
Yes.
Okay. So how you feeling so far about my questions that I asked you about your topic?
You know, they are real questions. And I think that's how I process, by those types of questions. And I was in your workshop last night and had so many little aha moments that my goal was to do the workshop, lay down and try again, but I just couldn't. I will say that, because I was taking notes and I needed to like jot it down real quick to come back to it today. But you call them ridiculous questions, but I appreciate your ridiculous questions, because it's like, it makes me really just think about it. And I think that's important for the way I learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I think too, like for me, if people didn't ask me those questions, I would have never known that I needed to address them.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it really is helpful. And again, it's based off of how you learn, and that is definitely how I learn. And when you don't feel supported in your program for whatever reason, when you find like these nuggets that you're providing, it really does help. It
Yeah.
truly does. So
Yeah.
it doesn't bother me. I don't even get offended by the question. I'm like, oh yeah, why does it say this and that? So it's good.
Okay, so tell me about these Black women in STEM.
So when I was thinking about, I used to work at a community college in career and technical education, and
Mm-hmm.
one thing about students who are in CTE programs, they want to go directly into the workforce. So they don't even want to transfer directly into the workforce. So when I think about Black women students who go into these programs for 2 years to go straight into a workforce, into a major in careers where they're not really supported, trying to figure out what are those factors that motivated you to go into this STEM field. Because when you just look at the data, especially in a state like Maryland, it's such a low rate of Black women who are in these fields, but you can find them in the social sciences and the humanities, which are typically lower income generators when it comes to Black women. So just like, what are those factors? Like what motivates you to go this direction when there's a lack of representation?
So why do we need Black women in STEM?
We need more Black faces and Black people in STEM, period. But one of the reasons is that when you think about how we're using AI, for example, and how a lot of times the prompts are geared towards white people, honestly. Like even if you do for the purposes of this dissertation, I use this AI career tool where you upload a profile, your professional shot, and ask them to make it more professional if you need to. And they were both Black women. The first Black woman, they changed the face to look more like an Asian woman, and the second one, they changed it to look more like a lighter skinned Black woman. So there's that human touch that is missing. Like if there was Black folks in those spaces,
Mm-hmm.
that could influence how AI works. When it comes to STEM, when it comes to research, we need to be in spaces, especially when it comes to health disparities, when it comes to research. So there are a lot of spaces where our influence needs to be, but we also have to have those degrees in order to be in those careers. So that's just two examples of why we need to be in those spaces to be influenced.
Mm-hmm. Now, why should we care about the disparity? I think that was the language you used.
It is. And that's one of the questions where I did not even address in my proposal yet why we should care about the disparity. But I guess the overarching theme is that these fields need to look like what the U.S. looks like. Like one of the things that there's a big whitewashing of STEM areas, and it is because we are not going into those fields, and we need those fields to look like what the U.S. looks like. And I don't think that when we think about those going into these fields, understanding how important that is. And another reason is the disparity is because just like we look at the income, like income of like Black women and versus white males, white females, there is such a difference. And when you look at the data that shows the different careers that we tend to go into, a big piece of it is we go into fields that typically pay lower.
Yeah. Now we have, just for me to recap, right? It's like it needs to match the demographic profile of the U.S. and the income, disparity in income.
Yes.
How would things change? In particular, there's a lot of things that could change, but for what you're interested in, what would change if there was more representation in these fields and the income also was higher for Black women?
It would change how, for one, it would change how the world thinks of who has access to these programs and access to these fields and access to these jobs. And also as it relates to, the second part was income. Because we're just not meeting that living wage. And a lot of that is because we are typically when we go to school and we get these degrees, we're in a lot more debt. And our debt does not match the degree programs that we have decided to go into. There's a lot more funding in STEM areas, so that can help as relates to financing higher ed, so that we won't have so much debt. But it will create this debt balance, and it will also create the balance as relates to just being able to have a living wage as everything is going up.
I mean, why should the institution care about Black women having a living wage? Like, why does it matter to them? They'll get their money.
That's real. It should matter because when you look at, you know what, and that's a good question, because when you look at how higher ed started, it wasn't built for Black women,
right?
At all.
Like,
so
y'all should be happy that we let you in here. What you complaining about?
And that's true. But because we are going to college in a higher rate than others, then we also influence retention, we influence persistence. We have so much influence because we're going at such a high rate that you should care. And it shouldn't matter what your student looks like. So if it is, why should we care about Black women in these fields? You should care about all students. But if you want to break it down, Black women are going at a higher rate. So we have influence on campus. We have influence when it comes to these rates that ultimately will influence the trajectory of the institutions.
Now, I have a clarifying question. When you say STEM, do you mean in general all STEM majors, or are there a particular area?
All STEM majors.
So for everyone, and also you, the other part too, when it comes to research, is it needs to be very clear about how it's going to contribute to the field, to the literature itself, right? You're like, well, they should care. They should know that they're like exactly who is going into STEM, and people should care that Black women are not having a living wage, that they're not able to, like in general, right, with the numbers, based in the debt ratio. However, whether we like it, we want to agree with it, we can argue about it or not, it still comes back to, well, why does it matter? As a STEM, as a field, why does it matter? Because it's survival of the fittest. So if Black women are not the fittest, they're not the fittest. Why, as a field, like, what is this information going to do? Like, understanding the experiences of these Black women in the community college, like, what is that information, that data, those findings? How is it, how is it going to help with changing the perception and the representation piece and the money? And then why should the most influence, the most powerful care about this?
And that's what I got from the workshop last night, actually. Taking it to the next level. Like that is the next level of thinking that in these conversations you get. Like when you're trying to do this on your own, you miss some of those pieces, but that's that next level of thinking where you do need to think about that aspect of it. Why should any institution care? Because ultimately they will get the tuition paid, they will have their money, so as long as they get them out. So that is a really good area to then now, like, focus on why it's important, because all the data is there to show what's not happening.
Yeah.
So that's the next level of
Mm-hmm.
what to kind of like think about.
So some things that you could go and review, and this is for everyone. Number one of my favorite things to say is, well, higher ed institutions, y'all love to put in your mission statements how you're here for diversity and inclusion, and that you're here for the whole student and all students. But are you really being congruent with your values and your mission if Black women over here are not having the same experience as your white students? You could say that. You could say, particularly in the state of Maryland, how many, if you're more like numbers based, you can say how many Black women, what's the rate, the graduation rate compared to the enrollment rates. If there's some data around what do those graduates, what do they go off to do? What type of, maybe continuing their education or any other type of, the type of jobs that they get. So you can further back up like the claim about the living wage and where like being from a STEM major helps. So you can demonstrate that. You can, this example with the AI, I would strongly encourage you to lead with that because that's going to be relevant. And you can say like getting the information by talking to these women and understanding like their motivations and the factors that contributed to them choosing this. That data will help preparation programs better their recruitment efforts, particularly as it relates to Black women. Yeah. It could be Black women themselves. We can give the findings, the data and the findings. We can go to secondary institutions or different communities and have data-backed suggestions or interventions that will be more, what is the word I'm looking for? Words are hard right now. That would be more beneficial to recruiting them into the programs. That's that extra layer. It's like, what is this study? How is it going to contribute?
Yeah.
And so if you could do that, that'll help for a very strong like topic, and then you don't get caught up in these endless, useless conversations with people about like, well, why does it matter about Black women and we don't care? I told you.
That's real. Like it's right there for you. You're right. That's true. Yeah. Okay. That is extremely helpful, and that's the next level that I'm going to like elevate. Because I thought about it last night in the workshop about the whole AI and the research, like medical research. I was like, I jotted that down because I need to dig deeper into that as another reason why this is important.
Yeah. I don't know how you started, if you wrote your introduction or how you started. Based on this, here's something you can consider. Your hook. So when you write your introduction, you want to start off with a hook, everyone, because you want to hook the reader into being like, let me learn more about this study. A great hook was that story you just told me around, we have these two women, these two individuals we put into this AI software, and this is what happened. And this is a result of not having the representation in the room, or the people, the coding, the design of these softwares, and AI is only going to get larger, and the impact rate is going to be greater. Like in 20 years, this will be just as normal as us being on social media, right? That everybody's going to be using AI. What are the implications for Black women not being in those rooms? That's a hook, because I'm like, oh, tell me more. And then you want to go into talking about, okay, how many Black women are going into STEM fields? What is a STEM field? How many Black women are going in? What are the factors that we know right now as to why they're going into it? What are some of the outcomes when you graduate with a STEM degree? Anybody want a dog?
A dog?
Y'all want him?
I saw your dog.
Y'all want him?
Last time I saw your dog in the
He's
background.
cute. He's annoying. He's just making a lot of noise. But
leave your dog alone.
Right, you start going into that, and then you start saying, but here's the flip side of it. Here's the problem. And because of this, the purpose of my study is XYZ.
Yeah.
Here are my questions. Here's my theoretical framework. Here's my methodology. Right, you see how it starts to flow into an introduction chapter?
Yeah.
But we need a hook, and we need to end that chapter with, and based on these findings are going to help preparation programs, employers, etc., to not only encourage Black women to go into STEM fields, but to help them be retained and to persist towards graduation, as well as be hired for jobs like AI type jobs. Now, I'm sure your language will be different because this is out of my wheelhouse, but just to give you an idea of how that chapter will look.
I got it. Okay. I'm on.
And I'll make sure this recording will be up, so if you need to come back and fast forward to this part,
okay,
you could do that.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or anything I can help you with?
That's it. I will be in your next workshop.
Yes.
So.
Yes, please do. And I've been telling people I don't know how to work this Instagram thing in terms of removing people, but yeah, the part 2 of the literature review workshop will be on the 17th, y'all. So there's still time to join us. You can hit the link in the bio. Oh, you figured it out. Thank you. You can hit the link in the bio and sign up. Right now it's 50% off. It's $50. Not only will you get access to the literature review workshops, you'll get access to our dissertation calls for the Finish Your Dissertation program for the month of August. We have 2 calls a week. We have a Thursday night call where either I'm teaching or coaching is happening, and coaching looks just like what I was just doing. I'm answering questions. I'm asking you about your dissertation. We're working on the technical pieces, or you might be like, I just ain't got it. I can't write. I don't know what it is. And we talk through that because it's my superpower. On Sunday nights, we have our planning call. So that is where you plan for the week, because there's no point in going into a week without a clear plan. Now, you might think that you are a superstar when it comes to planning, but I bet you don't plan the way I plan, because the way I plan is helping you to make progress towards completing the entire dissertation. So hit the link, y'all. You should definitely join us. You can even watch last night's recording. I'm proud of myself because I actually got that up last night. And Renice, are you still here? I was going to reach out to you to see how things are going. If you're brave, I don't know what you're doing and where you are, but if you are able, would you mind coming on? I'm just curious to see where you are in your process. Y'all, I only do that to clients. Call them out. If you are new, I'll let you get used to me first before I start asking you to show up on things. But yeah, I'm here, whether Renice wants to come on or if anybody else has any questions. I just was like, I'm here. I've been out all day. I was just going to talk to y'all about your dissertations, because some of y'all are still writing at night on a Friday night and probably Saturday morning. Okay. But if not, we can call it a day. I'm trying to think. Let me see. What all did I cover here? So on this live, to do a summary, what I covered was I would not begin the dissertation process as the literature review. I would start with the introduction chapter, because the introduction chapter is your outline for your dissertation. Once you have a shitty draft for your introduction chapter, then I encourage you to move on to your methodology chapter, because that forces you to explain exactly What data are you collecting and why are you collecting it that way? Once you have shitty drafts of chapter 1 and chapter 3, then you go to the literature review, because now you have a clear idea on what it is that you are justifying. You know what the problem you're addressing, you know what your purpose is, you know how you're getting data, and your literature review is to justify those decisions that you made. The literature review is not for you to just talk about any and everything related to your topic. It is a justification. It provides the background to your study. You don't know what your study is until you do chapter 1 and chapter 3. Now, when you do get to writing your literature review, I encourage you to take it 10 articles at a time. 10 articles, you're going to download them. You're going to write out their full citation and their in-text citation. You're going to read the abstract, introduction, discussion, implications, and recommendations. And that's it. You're not going to read the literature review. You're not going to read the methods. You're not going to read the findings. You're just going to go straight to the end, because that is where you're going to find the justification for why you're doing your study. Immediately after you're done reading each article in those sections only, you're going to open up a document and you're going to brain dump out a paragraph. That paragraph can just be whatever comes to your mind, or you can say, okay, here were the major findings. Here's what I agree with. This is what I would change or do differently. This is what it's making me think of. And you just want to write a shitty paragraph and you're going to move on. After you have 10 shitty paragraphs or 10 summaries of those articles, you're going to open up a new document and you're going to write a 2 to 4 page paper of those 10 articles. Like if you just had, like, treat this like this is high school and you got an exam and it's a 50-minute class, right? So if I only have 50 minutes to sit down and to write a 2 to 4 page paper on these 10 articles, what would I say? You're going to write that. You're going to take a break. You're going to come back. You're going to edit that. Edit for as long as you were writing. You want to edit. I would argue you want to add on some more hours, but listen, time is limited. You're going to edit it, and then you're going to send it off. You're going to send it off to someone that you trust, that you love, that you know has your best interest at heart, that someone who's not trying to come at you, they genuinely want to help you. You're going to send it off. And then you're going to go on to the next 10 articles. And you're going to keep repeating that until you get to a solid 20-page draft of your literature review. You're going to turn it into your chair. You're going to say, give me feedback. Because it's only then when you turn in a solid draft that they can tell you what their expectations are for the literature review. And if you want more information, sign up for the 30-day literature review workshop. Again, the link is in the bio. Okay. Denise says she can't come on, but she started the literature review. Okay, I will check in with you probably next week if you are able to make it to the call, or you can go ahead and schedule a private session. I just want to check in with you and see how things are going. All right, send me a DM, y'all, if y'all have any other questions. I'm going to let Sir go out, and I appreciate y'all hanging out with me on a Friday night. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye, y'all.